Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Hey, welcome back to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. My name is Sean. Hey, y'all have heard us talking about it, but our Rare at Sea cruise is right around the corner. Kyle, before we get into the meat of today's episode, I feel that we should share with our listeners the dilemma that you're up against. So let me just give what do we end up with? 2DD SWAT? Let me share with y'all what's happening. So in our particular cruise, we work with the travel agent, right? So Kyle or a user logs in and says, here's what I'm looking for, here's what I want, here's what I need. Can you quote that and then send it to me and I'll, sign and pay the deposit? Well, our travel agent did that and I assume missed a detail, but then sent that criteria to Kyle, and then Kyle was to review it, and I assume he also missed the same detail.
Yeah.
So as it turns out, no one person's fault, but unfortunately, Kyle, who's, a full-time wheelchair user, does not have an accessible room reserved on this cruise. And y'all, for those that maybe have cruised before, it's not just about handrails in the bathroom or a bench to sit on, which is where my brain often goes.
Right.
But the doorways are, a lot slimmer, narrower than your average door. And in my case, most accessible rooms that I've been in are typically in a position in the hallway that allows for easier access if you're in a chair, turning and so on. But if you're not in an ADA room, the hallway is even tight and it can be hard to turn and move and get lined up perfectly so you can get in the door.
That makes sense. Jeez.
Kyle, I know you're excited about the cruise, but this is it's gonna be a pain if that doesn't get resolved. It's gonna be a little nuisance the entire time.
Yeah, you sent me a YouTube link because apparently there are YouTube videos. Some of them are very brief tours of every single room. Is this true on the ship?
I mean, not every single, but it's pretty common to be able to find somebody that recorded a video, giving a quick review. Because if you're in the cruise community, everybody wants to know what it's gonna look and feel like. So yeah, it's pretty common that somewhere you can find a quick video of somebody showing off that particular cabin or stateroom on a previous cruise.
So you sent me this video and I looked at the doorway just to get in. I'm like, no, my wheelchair is not so if it in fact remains the same, I'm not even going to be able to get into the bathroom.
Yeah.
So, it's not exactly ideal.
It's going to be a challenge. I will say to our listeners, we do have a backup plan or two. We'll see how things play out. But, as of right now, Kyle's room is not going to work for him. So we're going to have to get creative.
Yeah, and we're not going to, go down the road of figuring out whose fault it was because it was probably mine.
Well, it's still going to be a fun 4 days, 5 nights.
No matter what.
And you just might want to bring a portable potty,
or I might just wear diapers the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Whatever Whatever works for you, buddy. We'll see what happens. We'll update you on how it played out soon.
It's gonna be great. Moving on, I want to talk about today something that we've talked about in other ways quite a few times. The line between hope and denial, or the difference between hope and denial. Last episode, we talked about holding two things at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like hope can be really helpful if it's true hope. It can also be harmful if it's not true. So, for example, like, we're all hoping for a cure for FA or whatever other rare disease community that you might be in. But
Sure.
when I first came into the FA community 20 years ago, there was a whole lot of hope for a cure.
Yeah.
And that was 20 years ago. And in that time, I had to adjust my expectations of not only when a cure might come, but what is that cure? What will it look like in actuality? And so, how do I adjust my hope based on what's actually happening? You know, another aspect of it, I think, is hope for the future in general, but then also living for today, because we know how important that is, holding on to today and really enjoying and being grateful, but also having hope for the future.
Yeah.
You've talked about participating in clinical trials, and we've talked about why we do that. And it's because we want a brighter future. Oftentimes in our heads, you know, it might not even be for ourselves, but for the next generation, we want a brighter future for them. You know what? But what if that doesn't happen?
Sure.
I mean, that's a reality that we have to balance with the hope for making a difference. We have to realize that at some level, that's just hope. The denial part of it, when we hold on to hope so much that we deny what we have today and we ignore our daily situation, and, oh, it's not so bad because I'm going to have a cure next year or in 5 years or whatever it is. So then we sort of change our perception maybe of our current situation, and because we're holding on to too much hope and denying a few things in our lives. Does this all track?
That was like a 30-minute monologue. So no, early on you said something about hope being true. I don't know that it has to be true. I think it has to be feasible or attainable in a sense, right? I believe ultimately, if we just stick with the diagnosis and rare disease, cure, no cure track, I believe someday there will be a cure. I hope it's in my lifetime. But if it's not, that's fine too. Like, I think a cure is achievable, but I don't know if it's going to be achievable in 20 years, like you said, or in 100 years. So
Right.
there is a balancing act of remaining positive and hopeful, but also realizing that it may or may not happen. It's buying a lottery ticket. Everybody that buys a lottery ticket hopes they win, but I think in the
Right.
back of everybody's mind, they know the chances of them winning are slim to none. But they still
Yeah.
buy tickets. They still get excited. They still take the risk. There's a difference between hoping and still working for it, as
Yeah.
opposed to just hoping and sitting on the couch waiting for it to happen. Like,
Yeah.
it's gonna require some effort on everybody's part to get there, right? Or if you think about a lottery ticket, you're gonna have to buy it. You can't win the lottery if you aren't buying tickets. So it's guaranteed I will never win because I never buy tickets.
Right.
But
Right.
the one or a couple times I might, just pitch into the pot at work or on a limb go out and buy one, of course I'm gonna hope I win. But I really
Yeah, if we don't participate and we don't fundraisers and we don't do all these things that move the needle, there's no way to have a cure for FA or any of these other diseases or a treatment. And so by participating and being hopeful, grounded in reality, then we can be hopeful.
I will say being grounded in reality is probably the hard thing. If I think back 5 years ago, FA didn't affect me terribly. Every now and then it was obvious and, I'd get tired and use a wheelchair at a zoo or Disneyland. But it wasn't it wasn't an everyday kind of thing.
Right.
Of course, today it's every day, right? I can't take a step without having something there to brace me, whether it be my walker or a counter. So today it's a little more obvious. The reality is right in front of me. I can't escape that. Whereas sometimes I imagine the mistake we make is that we don't recognize the impact it's going to have because it doesn't appear to have an impact right now. I think of this so minor and silly, but food. I can have a piece of candy right now and not realize the impact it might have down the road. So I decided to have a candy bar every day or a couple times a day. And before you know it, beer is a better example. You can have a beer every now and then and not notice. But if you drink beer every day, eventually you're going to wake up one day and look in the mirror and realize you have a beer belly. And it takes time to recognize the impact or the effects of a thing you do or don't do. And in the moment, it can be really hard to recognize the reality that you're going to be up against if you're not careful.
When we're thinking about now versus the future and hope, I feel like it was helpful for me to think about the difference between hope and denial, between true hope grounded in reality and denial of, oh no worries, I'm going to have a cure in a few years, or I don't need to think about that beer bill because it's not happening right now, right?
Sure.
I put this into AI, and AI told me that hope accepts reality as it is right now. And denial refuses to accept the current reality. Hope still believes meaning, joy, or progress is possible. And denial anchors your identity to a future version of yourself. So denial is certainly hoping for the future, but it's not based on where you are right now. It's not based on that reality. Hope is flexible, evolving, and grounded. Denial is often fueled by fear, grief, or pressure to stay positive. I think about denial as, oh yeah, no worries, I'm gonna get out of my wheelchair and run around in 10 years, right? Because we're gonna have a cure. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that's exactly the reality. I think maybe the more grounded in reality thing is hoping that I'll be able to speak a little more clearly in a few years, right?
Yeah.
That's a pretty strong hope. Not that I'm going to be able to be Kobe Bryant or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's a little more grounded in reality rather than denial.
I love, how ChatGPT, and you said it, hope accepts reality as it is right now. To me, accepting is recognizing. That doesn't mean I'm going to say, well, this is what I'm up against. There's no reason to try to fight it. I would replace the word accepts with recognizing. Just because I'm having a hard time walking doesn't mean I'm going to stop walking. I'm recognizing the difficulty and I'm putting things in place that allow me to keep walking safely.
Yeah.
Whether that's using a walker or, not trying to run or, just being mindful of what's around. But I'm not going to ever sit there and say, oh, well, the day has come. I need a wheelchair every day. So I'm giving up on life. I can't do anything else. So I'll quit my job and just be a lazy bum or live off the system or, not contribute in a meaningful way. Those are two different things. Accepting it and being okay with it versus recognizing it and building systems and processes in place that allow you to accomplish things that are important to you despite those hardships or situations. I'll give you a silly example. Talking to somebody a couple months ago on the phone, told them, I'm feeling a little sick under the weather. And their immediate response was, oh, don't claim that. Don't say it out loud. You don't want to accept that. And in my head, I'm like, oh, okay, I get where you're coming from, but that's not reality. The reality of it is I have a cough and I have a headache and my temperature is high. When I say these things, I'm not accepting it as, oh, I'm sick. I'm recognizing that maybe something's coming on and I need to take steps to make sure it doesn't get out of hand, such as drinking water, taking my vitamins, maybe getting a little extra rest. But the problem I think we run into is we want to deny reality, so we don't take the steps necessary to avoid things getting worse.
So along the same lines, hope delays grieving what's been lost. So in our situation of disability, we really do have to grieve and recognize, like you say, what we've lost so we can move on. We've both had to grieve the loss of physical abilities. I've talked about it before. I wish I could go out and go for a run. Maybe we both wish that, right? At some level. We've had to grapple with that reality, but we've done so to a certain extent. There's some of it that's always a little back and forth, but because we've dealt with it to a certain extent, we can move on from it. So I think, staying out of that denial of the current situation helps us actually grapple with it, and then we can move past. I think also denial makes you ignore your body's limitations to a certain extent. If you don't, like you say, recognize the limitations of your body, you could easily push yourself too far and get into trouble, like an injury or something like that. If I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go ice skating. I put on my ice skates and immediately fall on my face on the cold, hard ice. And so recognizing those limitations and not denying them can help us protect ourselves.
What comes to mind for me there is also the way I plan my week or my commitments. Because as much as I want to do everything, I recognize that there are some limitations. And so I need to be careful with how I commit my time and energy because I can't do everything. Today's a good example. I only have one day off this week because of some traveling coming up. Well, in the back of my head, I was kind of hoping to connect with a friend for coffee and maybe dinner and just hang out a little bit. But with only one day off, I recognize that that's not really a good idea because of all my chores and the rest I need to get ready for worked in life.
Yeah.
And then also my training for the Nissan. Today is the big Stairmaster day. I'm going to be on the stairs for a little more than an hour, and I'm going to be exhausted when I'm done. So the reality of it is I need to keep my priorities in line, recognizing what I'm up against and not denying things I want to do, but just recognizing that there are some limitations that I need to be mindful of.
That example is not so much about disability, but just about the limitation of time that everybody deals with. I think another thing that I know I've struggled with and that a lot of people with disability struggle with is hope can slip into denial when it feels like rest and accommodation turned into giving up. And so you're blaming yourself. You're denying that rest and accommodation is an actual real thing. And you're telling yourself, no, I'm just giving up. If I just try harder, I'll make it through this, even though I do need that rest and accommodation that is required right now because of my fatigue, my physical abilities, everything else that's going on.
Yeah, that one sticks out to me or speaks a lot because I recognize that I get tired quickly, but I've also have never allowed myself to sit something out and rest and take a nap or do those little things. So I have been in that mind frame where I sometimes let that correlate with giving up. And of course, the older I get, the more progressive my conditioning gets, the more I realize that's not giving up. That's actually setting me up to be able to continue doing what I want to do. That's a hard one to swallow for me.
So, Sean, I have a few examples to unpack. I think you'll relate to some of these. You know, we were talking a little bit earlier about hope for trials and hope for the future. If once this trial works out, once this cure is on the way, then I'll start living again. There's so many situations of if then. Well, if this happens, then I'll be happy. If this, if that. That's when hope turns into denial. When we hold onto these things, like we say, are not necessarily grounded in reality. If this just happens, then I'll be happy. Then I'll start living again.
Yeah, there's a fine line between hoping for those great big things like a cure or winning the lottery. I believe it's okay to have those bigger goals and dreams in mind, but it's also important that you do whatever you can today, despite those things not being in place. So, okay, that might come down the road, but what can I do today to still make it a fun or exciting or growth-minded day? And that's probably the trap because a lot of times we think if or when that happens, then life will be good. But the reality of it is life can be good today no matter what you're up against. So I love the meme that I've seen a few times just in the last couple months. There's this phrase that, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people have always said YOLO, right? You only live once, so take the risk, push the envelope, do big things because you only live once. And in this particular meme I've seen, the reality of it is you actually only die once. You live every day. So you have 85 years of chances to do something cool or to make life different. And just that perspective shift speaks to me. So I'm like, okay, I mean, I'll do something big and crazy every day, but that tells me, it gives me permission to pursue whatever I want because, yeah, it may not happen every day, but man, to have 20, 25, 30 stories of cool stuff over the next 50 years, that's better than, well, we'll wait and see. And when that one thing happens, it'll be a cool story. Why not create a million stories between now and the end of life?
So, Sean, really what you're talking about is hope rooted in values, not outcomes, like trying every day to make something great happen. Every single day, every single moment, trying and realizing that the outcome might not be what you expect. So your hope is not rooted in what's going to happen, but rooted in what you're doing all the time.
The way you rephrase it, I think about that quote, the man in the arena. Is that, I'm forgetting now, is it Roosevelt?
Yeah, I think so.
So he's basically talking about, I'd rather give credit or my salute or my handshake to somebody that got in the arena and tried. Even if they failed, they still were part of the process, part of the solution. They were trying. And I would rather that be my legacy. He tried all these things as opposed to, he lived a little.
And I love the hope being rooted in what we're doing moment to moment, and not the hope being rooted in what we would like to see happen in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, when it's rooted in values, it also makes decisions a lot easier. It makes choices easier because if you're committed to your values and you know what they are, then you'll know how to spend your time and energy and money and resources.
When we're talking about the immediate, it's hope for good days, not perfect bodies. Hope for good conversations, good connections between me and you, between any of our friends, right? And not the hope for a cure, but the hope that we can live an incredible life in the bodies that we have right at this moment.
Yep. And those elements of hope are going to keep it sustainable. That keeps it burning and burning for a very long time.
Sean, before we wrap up, I want to throw something out for both of our considerations. And I just wanted to see, where are you currently holding hope, and where have you had to let denial go to make space for that hope, maybe?
Yeah. Strong question. My current hope is to stand on top of the Nissan, right? That big stairway coming up here in about 5 months. I'm living every day with that hope in mind, but also the reality of that's not going to be a walk in the park. So I'm training the way I'm eating. There's just the way I'm living my life. It all revolves around the idea of getting to the top of the Nissan in several months. Where I've had to let go of denial, I don't know that I have anything in recent history or current times stick out to me, but this was a big issue for me almost 20 years ago. Without getting into too many details, Kyle, you've known me for a long time, and we've talked about it on the podcast, but I got married once, and that marriage came to an end, and now life is completely different. Well, it took me several years to come to grips with how different life is going to look for me based on what I thought life was going to be. Being married, having kids, raising a family, blah, blah, blah. But that's totally different. And I don't know where denial comes into play, but at some point I had to realize, okay, that maybe that's not the life I'm going to live. So I had to come to grips with being okay with that, but still making the most out of what I do have and what I can do. So I know that's kind of vague and maybe doesn't answer your question specifically, but when something changes so drastically or dramatically, it can take some time to recognize what that long-term impact is going to be.
I love it. I hope to ride my trike to the top of Haleakala in Hawaii in August, where I've had to let denial go. This is not a recent thing because it's sort of been an evolution in my thinking. It's about gene therapy. Originally, my thinking was I can't wait to have gene therapy for FA because then we'll all get up and walk around or go play basketball, as I was mentioning earlier. I literally had that in my head that gene therapy was going to be this cure that's going to take away all of our problems.
Sure.
Well, I've learned over the past 5-10 years that that's not reality. Gene therapy is likely going to be a treatment that is going to improve some symptoms, but it's not totally going to take FA away. And there's a lot of different reasons, a lot of details for that thinking, but that denial, I had to let it go because I was so hopeful and wanted that so much that I was denying all the details and the reality. So that's the one denial that I've let go of. I think that has stoked my hope for a treatment, for gene therapy, for example, in a FA, because it's based in reality and I can lean into that hope even more.
Yeah. I think maybe a good question for listeners this week. What's your version of hope? What are you looking forward to? And maybe examine where you're in denial. And just a reminder, I had to go back and look at notes, but denial is easy to define when you think of it. It's refusing to accept current reality, or maybe it anchors your identity to a future version of yourself. So where are you maybe holding on to denial that you need to make room for a little bit more hope or a little bit more action on your part?
If hope is helping you stay connected to your life, hold it tight. If it's keeping you from living, it might be time to let it evolve. Sean, that was a whole lot of rambling. I hope that comes together in a cohesive conversation. We'll see. Let's move on to thank you notes, though, because along with all that, we know that gratitude helps us keep everything in perspective and it helps us stay grounded in our lives. So who do you have to thank today?
There was so much in that conversation that made me think of current events in our world, especially in the United States, but to avoid getting into an area we don't want to be in. I'm really grateful for social media and how well connected our world is. I do think there's some pros and cons to that.
Right.
I believe being well connected, there's some bad things to that, but I'm really grateful in the terms of I can see what's happening in the world, or, stay aware a little bit. Because if you don't recognize it as reality, or you're a little removed, you don't really think about it or feel it personally, it's really easy to think it's not happening or it doesn't exist. And especially as things unfold in the US, I don't ever want to be guilty of assuming it's not real or it's not important because it doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
We all have a part to play in making the world go around for everybody. So with that in mind, I'm really grateful that there are ways to stay connected even without 6 o'clock news. What about you?
My thank you note goes out to something very simple. The very moment there's about a foot of snow on the ground right now. And earlier today, I heard some scraping on the walkway outside, and I looked out, and there's someone shoveling the walkway. And it's so nice. Like, I was planning on not leaving for a few days, but I could now if I really wanted to, because somebody shoveled. So thank you to my condo complex for hiring people to shovel. But also, I opened my door and just said thank you to the actual guy that was holding the shovel. It's cold out there, man.
Sure.
And he's working hard to make sure we can get out. So I appreciate that.
I'm really thankful I don't deal with snow in Sacramento.
Yeah, that is fair. And thank you, dear listener, for your attention today. It was an important conversation. We got a lot out of it. Hopefully you did too. Check out our website, twodisableddudes.com, for the notes for this episode, where you can find links to anything we talked about today. Share this with a friend if you like what you hear, and please subscribe. Until next time, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to stay connected.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player.